or data, the operating system for modern media. Dear listener, hello, welcome to the Quarter Hour. Today, a continued tribute to the wonderful James Valentine. So I don't know if you were watching the ABC last night, but Australian Story is one of those staples in our household. It's Mondays at 8 o'clock, Australian Story goes on, and lo and behold, as it says on the tin, you learn a great Australian story. And James Valentine was on last night talking about his final 12 months and the journey he went on. And you've probably heard some great tributes to James, all very well deserved, but there was one that really struck me on a number of levels, and I thought I had to get the author of this article on to talk about it. Let me start by reading you the opening couple of paragraphs, and then I'll introduce the author. About 10 years ago, the phone rang in the Triple J office in Melbourne, and a voice on the other end said, "Do you want to come on the radio with me?" I just started working at the ABC after years at community radio station Triple R, and now ABC Radio Sydney talkback star and professional saxophonist James Valentine was suggesting we do a music segment together. There was, even in that first call, a magic to the way James conducted the world around him, full of risk, play, and his delight in both. Jacinta Parsons, hello.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
I'm so happy to join you, particularly around this stuff. You know, how beautiful to talk about one of the great craftsmen, I suppose, in the world that we love, radio, and particularly talkback radio. You know, there is something very special about that format, but also when someone kills it, you know, you really see it.
I'm going to just ask you about that first paragraph and that first phone call. Can you remember the sound of his voice in your mind?
Yes. I remember where I was sitting. I remember everything about it because I was broadcasting for years, and then I moved to the ABC as the music director. So not with a a show in any way. So no broadcasting role necessarily. And so when he called and I knew who he was and just the naughtiness of him, I was like, this is my happy place in every single possible way of it. I remember him in every moment, really. I think, we've all been reminiscing about James and his impact, as listeners, as colleagues, as all the things that we are to him. And I just think his humanity was so special. His play was so special. And I think, we don't have enough of that kind of risk and joy in our radio landscape like we should.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Also, I think that what has come through in the tributes is some of those moments that were so unique staples. And it's almost a shame that the people of Sydney got him all to themselves. I think as a Melbourne person, I'm thinking of we've obviously had some great practitioners of broadcasting in Melbourne, you being one of them, but I often think there was something special about that show, the special sauce that he had. And on the Australian Story, when he was talking about being able to have those moments of, I've got nothing, I don't have anything. And in your article, you talk about how he really valued his listeners and his audience as collaborators on the program. Do you want to expand on that a bit?
I think it's maybe something we've lost in some way to the rigor of what that is. So there's a real kind of craft and intention that the audience isn't just kind of there. They're absolutely essential. And when you think about them in that way, as James did, it really shapes the type of radio that you make and the type of work that you do in the world. So he was so interested in what he could make with them that he was open to it. And I think, learning from him, that was, it was my instinct, but also there's fearlessness that needs to take place with a public performance where you're relying upon this, unknown to deliver the goods. But I think faith and all the aspects that he showed me, that's actually what it's about. It's about the joy. It's about the absurdity of our living. And it's about honoring all of that.
Yeah, I think there's only one person I can think of in broadcasting I'm sure I'm going to be fact checked here, but one person I can think of that is sort of on par with him, and that's Greg James from BBC Radio 1 in London. Greg is a solo host, but
Mhm.
when you hear his show, he absolutely understands that his listeners are the collaboration point. It's not about, here's a topic, call in. It's not about, I'd love to hear what you're
No,
doing.
and
Mm.
such a good point. Such a good point. Sorry to interrupt you, but that like hearing the difference. It's not, okay, we're having an interaction that is formulaic almost. Like, I'll give you a question, you'll tell me the answer, and then we'll move on. James was like, what can we do with each other here? How can we,
Yeah. Can we have fun together?
yeah. And how can we change the way we think about things in this moment right now? And again, he was never earnest like I am in the describing of his work, like I feel really earnest in sort of talking about what he did, but it was so instinctive and so true and so part of a loving craft that that's kind of what came out.
I hear your love of craft and your broadcasting style. Question without notice here. You sound to me when you're on the air very intentional. You're very deliberate in your ability to clearly enunciate, which, I mean, I know that sounds not patronizing. It almost sounds like, well, of course, but so many broadcasters don't. I hear you use pace. I hear you use a smile in your voice. And I'm wondering what sort of broadcaster you were before interacting with James the first time. Have you always been like this, or did James teach you a few things?
I don't know. Even you saying that now, I'm like, oh, am I? You know,
I hear it.
um, You know, I had that romance of radio since I was tiny. I loved it. I loved the play of those early days of talkback radio. You know, late night with Phil and whoever on 3AW.
Bruce and Phil.
Bruce and Phil, like the
Yeah.
most absurdly beautiful companions to have through the middle of the night. So there was already I was already being schooled in that way. Um, but I think, and that's interesting that you say that about me. I don't even think that about myself. In fact, I think that partly what people say about me is chaos and, like it's loose and it's all this, but it's very intentional. And I love that you've picked that up because I think the invitation to an audience is always, you know what? Anything might happen and it could be you, you know, come and play with us, come and what this is not only just radio, but it's like how we kind of give example of our humanity to each other when we love each other in really strange, absurd ways on talkback topics that are absolutely stupid. It gets derided a lot, but I think it's an exposition of the better part of us. So I'm quite earnest about what it is. But in the moment, of course, it's just there's so much joy to be had, really, in in those moments with each other.
And I think it's not a terrible thing to be earnest about being joyful. I mean, I hear that with you and Brian on the Friday Review. I think that you and Brian Nankervis, for those that are outside of Melbourne, you do a great job of understanding how to support each other on the air, and you do a great job of also intentionally having fun. And I think it's more the embracing of that I heard with James. And again, I wasn't lucky enough to hear every afternoon, but we've been blessed over the Australian Story last night, but also hearing some of the clips that have been played over the last couple of weeks. And you see that cheeky glint in the eye. You see the opportunity that he can feel in and around him with a topic. And there's very few, I think, craft professionals in the industry. Ross Stevenson, I think, is one as well who understands just the mechanics of taking 3 seconds from here and 6 seconds from there and an open invitation there, and something that goes wrong or something that's meant to be a little bit out of whack, and mixing all that together to make a special sauce. It is quite rare.
It's rare, but it's needed more, I think. I think this is what the antidote and I think this is what is essential about talkback radio and connective radio is that it's not formulaic. It is presented and we are brave enough to sit there and go, "I don't know," that central bombast, that would, that would pontificate from a microphone, perhaps in the earlier days of talkback radio or radio more generally, that's had to shift to understand the role that we really have. And I think that still needs some articulation. Talkback radio and the version that James Valentine did is about being included. It's about companionship. It's about humility from him. He didn't know everything and he loved not knowing everything, and particularly from a male voice. The gift of that is enormous, that we're not listening to somebody who has to be the authority. He's just loving learning, in that moment with us. And I think it's actually a really important social role that is played in that, because so much of our community are listening and participating. Either they're on or they're not, but there is a way that we understand ourselves through what we hear on Talkback Radio. Who are we? What are the people that we live with? What are we thinking? What's the kind of tone? What's the temperature? And we get a sense of identity through it. And so practitioners like him made it so enjoyable to be around each other, and I think that is a really important offering.
Yep. And it's something the algorithms can't do, Jacinta. Yet.
No, they cannot. And I hope, the humanity of Talkback Radio, I think, will be one of those things that unless we really understand it, unless we really capture it, we will not respect it the way we need to. We will not save it the way we need to.
Well said.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on. You are an author. Your article is brilliant. It's on the ABC website if you want to search it up. Just look for Jacinta Parsons and search up her words on James Valentine. Australian Story is on iView. Go and watch it. I think that there's lots of levels to watch it on. There's a very human level.
Yeah.
There's obviously an emotional level. It is very sad and
Mm.
but also empowering in the way he took control of a situation that was really quite devastating. But also from a radio level.
Yeah, and being able to have a chat so deeply with him, months before he died, the consistency of the human, I think that's what's so beautiful. We see so much performance happening when that's not really what any of us need. We just need humans being humans. And when you see a man, and I said to him, I feel so honored to actually get to see how you've done this, of all the things we wonder about, it's how we will deal with this. And how wonderful to have an opportunity to see you deal with your death the way you have dealt with your life. So there's so much we can learn from him in his work and in his life, but how beautiful that he also gave us that gift in his death.
Beautifully said. Thanks, Jacinta. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jacinta Parsons there from the ABC. She's on Friday afternoons with Brian Nankervis on the Friday Revue and Saturday mornings across ABC Victoria as well. And they're all podcasts. So go to ABC Listen and you can have a listen to Jacinta's brilliant work. She's a wonderful broadcaster, warm, compassionate, funny, human. Human's a great word for it. And I'm sure James would be absolutely looking down and thinking how proud he is of Jacinta's work because she's a very talented and very well-respected broadcaster. Dear listener, thanks for joining us on the Quarter Hour. Another episode later in the week, and we're going to have a look at the issue of localism versus networking. What works, what doesn't, and why. That's coming up on the Quarter Hour. See you then.